As a retired banker, I thought I had secured a comfortable future for myself and my family. But when my son, influenced by his greedy wife, tried to use my own business shares against me, I knew I had to take action. Quietly, I restructured the ownership of the family business, ensuring that control remained in my hands. And when they confronted me, demanding that I hand over what they believed was rightfully theirs, I shocked them with the legal documents that proved their schemes had failed. This is the story of how I outsmarted my own flesh and blood, and taught them the true meaning of loyalty, respect, and the consequences of their own greed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening from in the comments. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of my study, casting a warm glow over the room. I sat at my desk, a steaming cup of coffee in my hand, as I pored over the latest financial reports from Brooks Banking Co., the business I had built from the ground up over the past 4 decades. At 66 years old, I had long since stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the company, entrusting the reins to my son, Ethan, and his wife, Valerie. It had seemed like the natural choice at the time. Ethan had grown up in the business, learning the ins and outs of banking at my knee, and Valerie had a sharp mind for numbers and a keen eye for opportunity. But lately, something had felt off. There were discrepancies in the reports, irregularities that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And then, there were the whispers I had heard around town, rumors of shady deals and questionable practices, all linked back to my son and daughter-in-law. I had tried to confront them about it, to get to the bottom of what was going on, but every time I brought it up, they brushed me off with vague reassurances and empty promises. "Don't worry, Dad," Ethan would say, flashing me that charming smile that had always been able to melt my resolve. "We've got everything under control. Trust us." But the truth was, I didn't trust them. Not anymore. Not after the way they had been behaving lately. The entitled attitude and the greedy gleam in their eyes. It was as if they had forgotten everything I had taught them about integrity and responsibility, about the importance of always putting the needs of the business and the community first. And then, there was the matter of my shares in the company. As the founder and majority owner, I had always maintained control over the direction of the business, even after stepping back from day-to-day operations. But lately, Ethan and Valerie had been pushing me to sell my shares, to hand over complete control to them. "It's time for you to enjoy your retirement, Dad," Valerie had said, her voice dripping with false concern. "Let us take the burden off your shoulders. We'll make sure the business is well taken care of." But I knew better. I knew that they weren't interested in taking care of the business. They were interested in taking care of themselves. They wanted my shares so that they could do whatever they wanted with the company, without any oversight or accountability. And that was something I simply could not allow. As I sat there in my study, staring down at the papers in front of me, I felt a cold determination settle over me. I knew what I had to do. I had to protect my legacy, to ensure that the business I had built would continue to thrive long after I was gone. And I had to do it quietly, without tipping my hand to Ethan and Valerie. I reached for the phone, my fingers dialing the number of my longtime lawyer and friend, Jack Thompson. He picked up on the second ring, his voice warm and familiar. "Daniel," he said, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation to come. "Jack," I said, "I need your help. It's about the business, and about Ethan and Valerie." There was a pause on the other end of the line, a moment of heavy silence, and then Jack's voice, low and serious. "I'm listening," he said. "Tell me everything." And so I did. I told him about the discrepancies in the financial reports, about the rumors of misconduct and malfeasance. I told him about Ethan and Valerie's increasingly erratic behavior, about their attempts to pressure me into selling my shares. And then I told him my plan. A quiet restructuring of the company's ownership, a legal maneuver that would ensure that control remained firmly in my hands, even if Ethan and Valerie tried to make a move against me. Jack listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration. When I had finished, he let out a low whistle. "That's a bold move, Daniel," he said. "Are you sure you want to go through with it?" I nodded, my jaw set with determination. "I have to, Jack. I can't let them destroy everything I've built. I won't let them use my own business as a weapon against me." Jack was quiet for a moment, considering. And then he nodded, his voice firm with resolve. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it. Let's make sure that your legacy is protected, no matter what." And with those words, the wheels were set in motion. The quiet restructuring had begun, and there would be no turning back. Not until Ethan and Valerie learned the true cost of their greed and betrayal. Over the next few weeks, Jack and I worked tirelessly to put our plan into action. We pored over legal documents and financial statements, crafting a new ownership structure that would give me ironclad control over the company, even if Ethan and Valerie tried to make a move against me. It was a delicate operation, one that required the utmost secrecy and discretion. We couldn't risk tipping our hand too early, or giving Ethan and Valerie any reason to suspect that something was amiss. And so we worked quietly, behind closed doors and in hushed tones. We brought in a team of trusted advisors and experts, people who could help us navigate the complex web of legal and financial regulations that governed the business world. There was Marcus, the brilliant young lawyer, who had a mind like a steel trap and a knack for finding loopholes in even the most airtight contracts. There was Sarah, the forensic accountant who could sniff out financial irregularities like a bloodhound on the scent. And there was Tom, the private investigator who had a network of contacts that stretched from the boardrooms of Wall Street to the back alleys of the city. Together, we formed a tight-knit team, a band of loyal allies, united in our determination to protect my legacy and expose the truth about Ethan and Valerie's misdeeds. As we worked, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness and betrayal wash over me. These were my own children, the flesh of my flesh, and the blood of my blood. I had raised them to be good and decent people, to value honesty and integrity above all else. But somewhere along the way, they had lost their way. They had become seduced by the allure of power and wealth, by the false promises of a life of luxury and ease. And in doing so, they had forgotten the values that had always been the foundation of our family and our business. It was a bitter pill to swallow, a harsh reality that I had been forced to confront head-on. But I knew that I could not let my personal feelings cloud my judgment, or prevent me from doing what needed to be done. And so, I pressed on, working tirelessly to put the pieces of my plan into place. I signed documents and transferred assets, all under the watchful eye of my team of advisors. I made quiet phone calls and held secret meetings, always careful to cover my tracks and maintain the illusion of business as usual. But even as I worked to protect myself and my company, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing on the horizon, a storm that threatened to tear everything apart. It started with small things at first, whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room, furtive glances exchanged between Ethan and Valerie when they thought I wasn't looking. But as the days turned into weeks, the signs became more overt, more impossible to ignore. There were missing files and deleted emails, financial records that seemed to vanish into thin air. There were unexplained absences and last-minute changes to long-standing plans, all without any clear explanation or justification. And then there were the rumors. Whispers of secret meetings and backroom deals, of shady characters and questionable alliances. It was as if Ethan and Valerie were building a shadow empire right under my nose, a web of deceit and corruption that threatened to engulf everything I'd worked so hard to build. But still, I held my tongue and bided my time. I knew that the moment of reckoning was coming, the day when I would finally confront my son and daughter-in-law with the truth of their actions. And so, I waited. watching and listening, gathering evidence and building my case. I knew that when the time was right, I would be ready to strike, to expose their lies and their betrayals for all the world to see. But even as I prepared for battle, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and foreboding wash over me. I knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous, that there would be obstacles and challenges at every turn. And I knew that when the truth finally came out, it would be like a bomb going off in the heart of our family and our business. A blast that would leave nothing but scorched earth and shattered dreams in its wake. But I also knew that I had no choice, that I could not stand by and watch as everything I had built was destroyed by the very people I had entrusted to protect it. And so, with a heavy heart and a steely resolve, I prepared for the confrontation that I knew was coming. The moment of truth that would determine the fate of my legacy and the future of my family. It was a burden that weighed heavily on my shoulders, a responsibility that I had never asked for, but could not shy away from. But I was ready to face it, head on, to fight for what was right and true, no matter the cost. For I was Daniel Brooks, a man of principle and integrity, a father and a husband and a leader. And I would not rest until justice was done, until the truth was revealed and the guilty were held accountable for their crimes. No matter how painful or difficult the journey might be, I knew that it was a path I had to walk, a duty I could not shirk. And so, with a deep breath and a heavy heart, I prepared for the battle to come. The day of reckoning arrived on a cold, gray morning in early November. I sat in my study, watching the rain beat against the windows and listening to the wind howl through the bare branches of the trees outside. It was a fitting backdrop for what was to come, a reflection of the storm that was about to break over my family and my business. I had called a meeting of the board of directors, a gathering of the most powerful and influential people in the company. They were the ones who had the power to make or break my plan, to decide the fate of Brooks Banking Co., and everyone who depended on it. As I waited for them to arrive, I couldn't help but feel a sense of nervousness and trepidation wash over me. I knew that what I was about to do would change everything, that there would be no going back once the truth was revealed. But I also knew that it was the right thing to do, the only thing to do if I wanted to protect my legacy and the future of the company. And so, with a deep breath and a determined set to my jaw, I gathered up my papers and made my way to the boardroom. When I arrived, the room was already filled with a tense, expectant energy. The directors sat around the long, polished table, their faces grim, and their eyes darting back and forth between me and Ethan and Valerie, who sat at the far end of the room. I could see the confusion and the apprehension in their eyes, the unspoken questions that hung heavy in the air. They knew that something was amiss, that the sudden meeting and the somber atmosphere could only mean one thing: trouble. But they had no idea just how deep that trouble ran, or how far the rot had spread within the company they had sworn to serve. I took my seat at the head of the table, my heart pounding in my chest, and my palms slick with sweat. I knew that the next few minutes would be some of the most important of my life, that the words I spoke and the actions I took would echo through the years to come. And so, with a final stealing breath, I began to speak. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," I said, my voice steady and clear despite the turmoil raging inside me. "I know that you're all busy people, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here today." I paused for a moment, letting my gaze sweep around the room, taking in the faces of the men and women who held the fate of my company in their hands. "I've called this meeting because there's something important that I need to share with you, something that affects the very future of Brooks Banking Co., and everyone who depends on it." I could see the flicker of interest in their eyes, the slight leaning forward in their chairs as they waited to hear what I had to say. And then, with a final decisive nod, I dropped the bombshell. For the past several months, I have been conducting a quiet investigation into the activities of my son, Ethan Brooks, and his wife, Valerie, and what I have discovered is deeply troubling. I could see the shock and the disbelief ripple through the room, the stunned expressions on the faces of the directors as they struggled to process what I had just said. But I pressed on, my voice growing stronger and more determined with every word. I have uncovered evidence of financial irregularities, of questionable business practices and unethical behavior. I have found proof of embezzlement, fraud, and a pattern of misconduct that stretches back years. I could hear the gasps and the murmurs of disbelief, the rising tide of anger and outrage as the directors began to comprehend the full scope of what I was saying. But I wasn't finished yet. And perhaps most troubling of all, I said, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. I have discovered that Ethan and Valerie have been working to undermine my authority and seize control of the company, using my own shares and my own legacy as weapons against me. The room erupted in chaos, voices rising in anger and confusion as the directors demanded answers and explanations. But through it all, I remained calm and steadfast. My eyes locked on Ethan and Valerie's faces as they sat frozen in their seats, their expressions a mix of shock and rage and fear. And then, with a final triumphant flourish, I laid my trump card on the table. But what they didn't know, I said, my voice ringing out, clear and strong above the din, is that I have been working behind the scenes to protect myself and my company. I have quietly restructured the ownership of Brooks Banking Co., ensuring that control remains firmly in my hands, no matter what they try to do. I could see the blood drain from their faces, the realization dawning in their eyes as they began to comprehend the full extent of their failure. And then, with a grim smile of satisfaction, I slid a stack of legal documents across the table towards them. These papers, I said, prove everything I've just told you. They detail the full extent of Ethan and Valerie's misconduct, and they lay out the new ownership structure of the company. As of this moment, they no longer have any power or authority here. The room was silent for a long, tense moment, the only sound the rustling of papers as the directors began to leaf through the documents in front of them. And then, slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. One by one, the directors began to nod their heads, their expressions hardening with resolve and determination as they realized the full extent of what had been done and what needed to be done to make it right. And as I watched them rally around me, as I felt the weight of their support and their belief in me, I knew that I'd won, that the battle had been fought, and the victory had been claimed. But even as I savored the sweet taste of triumph, even as I felt the rush of vindication and relief wash over me, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness and regret deep in my heart. Because I knew that this was only the beginning, that there would be more battles to come and more wounds to heal all in the long and difficult road ahead. And I knew that, no matter how hard I fought, or how fiercely I protected what was mine, there would always be a part of me that mourned for what had been lost, for the family that had been broken, and the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. But I also knew that I had no choice, that I could not falter or hesitate in the face of such betrayal and deceit. And so, with a heavy heart but an unshakable resolve, I prepared to lead my company and my family into the unknown, to forge a new path through the darkness and the uncertainty that lay ahead. For I was Daniel Brooks, a father, a leader, a man of principle and strength, and I would not rest until justice was done, until the truth was known, and the guilty were held to account. No matter how long it took, no matter how hard I had to fight, I would not be broken and I would not be beaten. Not now, not ever. The days and weeks that followed the board meeting were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. The news of Ethan and Valerie's misconduct spread like wildfire through the company and the community, sparking a firestorm of gossip and speculation. There were those who stood by me, who rallied around me and offered their support and their condolences in the face of such a terrible betrayal. They were the ones who had always known me as a man of integrity and honor, who had trusted in my leadership and my vision for the company. But there were also those who whispered behind my back, who questioned my judgment and my ability to lead in the wake of such a scandal. They were the ones who had always been jealous of my success, who had waited in the shadows for the chance to tear me down and take what was mine. And through it all, I remained steadfast and resolute, my head held high and my eyes fixed on the horizon. I knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be challenges and obstacles at every turn. But I also knew that I had the strength and the determination to see it through, to rebuild what had been broken, and to forge a new path for myself and for my company. And so, I threw myself into the work of recovery and renewal, pouring all of my energy and my passion into the task of healing the wounds that had been inflicted on Brooks Banking Co. I worked tirelessly to root out the corruption and the misconduct that had taken hold under Ethan and Valerie's watch, to implement new policies and procedures that would ensure that such abuses could never happen again. I reached out to my employees and my customers, reassuring them of my commitment to their well-being and my dedication to the values that had always been the foundation of our success. And slowly, but surely, the tide began to turn. The company began to stabilize, the chaos and the uncertainty of the past few months giving way to a new sense of purpose and direction. The employees rallied around me, their loyalty and their dedication to the company stronger than ever in the face of such adversity. And, as the weeks turned into months, I began to see the first glimmers of hope on the horizon, the first signs that the worst was behind us and that a brighter future lay ahead. But even as I savored these small victories, even as I felt the weight of the burden begin to lift from my shoulders, I knew that there was still one final challenge that I had to face, one last battle that I had to fight. And that was the battle for my own family, for the hearts and minds of the people I loved most in the world. Ever since that fateful board meeting, my relationship with Ethan and Valerie had been strained to the breaking point. They had retreated into a world of their own, a fortress of anger and resentment and betrayal that seemed impenetrable and unassailable. They refused to speak to me, refused to even acknowledge my presence when we were forced to be in the same room together. And every attempt I made to reach out to them, to bridge the gap that had grown between us, was met with nothing but cold silence and bitter recrimination. It was a pain that cut me to the very core of my being, a wound that seemed to fester and grow with each passing day. Because despite everything that had happened, despite all the lies and the betrayal and the heartache, they were still my children, the flesh of my flesh and the blood of my blood. And I knew that I could not rest, could not truly heal, until I had found a way to mend the rift that had torn our family apart. And so, with a heavy heart and a determined spirit, I set out to do just that. I reached out to Ethan and Valerie, not as a businessman or a leader, but as a father and a husband, as a man who had loved them from the moment they first drew breath. I sent them letters and emails, poured out my heart in words that I hoped would reach them, would touch the part of them that still remembered the bond that had once been the foundation of our lives together. I invited them to dinner, to family gatherings and holidays, even though I knew that the chances of them accepting were slim to none. And through it all, I never gave up hope, never lost faith in the power of love and forgiveness to heal all, even the deepest of wounds. And then, one day, a miracle happened. It was a small thing at first, a tentative olive branch extended across the vast expanse of hurt and anger that had grown between us. A phone call from Valerie, her voice trembling with emotion as she asked if we could meet, if we could talk about everything that had happened and try to find a way forward. And then, a few days later, A knock on my door. And there was Ethan, his eyes red-rimmed and his shoulders slumped with the weight of his guilt and his shame. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking with tears, "I'm so sorry. For everything." And in that moment, as I looked into the eyes of my son and saw the pain and the regret that mirrored my own, I knew that the battle had been won, that the long and difficult journey of healing had finally begun. It wasn't easy, of course. There were still wounds to be tended, still scars that would never fully fade. But as we sat together in the living room of the home that had once been filled with laughter and love, as we talked and cried and held each other close, I knew that we had taken the first step on the road to reconciliation, to building a new future together as a family. And as the sun began to set outside the windows, casting a warm, golden glow over the room, I felt a sense of peace and contentment wash over me, a deep and abiding gratitude for the incredible journey that had brought us to this moment, because I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, no matter what storms we might have to weather, we would face them together, as a family, as a testament to the unbreakable bonds of love and loyalty that had always been the true strength and the true legacy of the Brooks clan. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all, the sweetest triumph that any man could ever hope to claim. For I was Daniel Brooks, a father, a leader, a man who had stared down the darkness and emerged unbroken and unafraid. And, as long as I had the love and the forgiveness of those who mattered most, as long as I had the strength and the courage to keep fighting for what was right and true, then I knew that there was nothing I could not overcome, no battle I could not win. And so, with a smile on my face and a song in my heart, I looked to the future with hope and with joy, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead with open arms and an open heart. For the best was yet to come, and the road ahead was full of promise and possibility, and I could not wait to see where it would lead us next. The years that followed were a time of healing and renewal, of rebuilding the bonds of love and trust that had been so badly frayed by the trials we had endured. Ethan and Valerie worked hard to make amends, to prove to me and to the world that they had truly changed, that they were ready to be the kind of leaders and the kind of people that our family and our company deserved. They threw themselves into their work with a passion and a dedication that I had never seen before, pouring all of their energy and their talent into the task of restoring Brooks Banking Co. to its former glory. They reached out to our employees and our customers, listening to their concerns and their ideas, working tirelessly to build a new culture of transparency and accountability within the company. And slowly but surely, the wounds began to heal all. The scars began to fade, and a new sense of hope and possibility began to take hold. As for me, I found myself stepping back from the day-to-day operations of the business, entrusting more and more of the responsibility to Ethan and Valerie as they proved themselves worthy of the task. I spent more time with my wife, with my grandchildren, savoring the simple joys of family and friendship that had always been the true center of my life. I traveled the world, exploring new places and new cultures, learning and growing in ways that I had never thought possible. And through it all, I felt a deep sense of peace and contentment, a quiet satisfaction in knowing that I had fought the good fight, that I had done what was right and true, no matter the cost. But even as I enjoyed this new chapter of my life, even as I reveled in the freedom and the joy of my golden years, I never forgot the lessons that I had learned, the truths that had been seared into my soul by the fires of adversity and betrayal. I knew that trust was a fragile thing, a delicate flower that could be easily crushed by the winds of greed and ambition. I knew that family was everything, that the bonds of blood and love were the only things that truly mattered in the end. And I knew that leadership was a sacred responsibility, a calling to serve and to protect, to put the needs of others before my own. These were the values that I had always tried to live by, the principles that had guided me through the darkest of times and the most difficult of challenges. And as I looked back on my life, on the long and winding road that had brought me to this moment, I knew that I had no regrets, that I had lived a life of purpose and meaning, a life that had made a difference in the world. But even as I savored this sense of fulfillment and completion, I knew that my work was not yet done, that there was still one more task that I had to undertake, one more legacy that I had to leave behind. And so, on a warm summer day, I gathered my family together, my dildren and my gran-tildren, my wife and my closest friends. I told them of my plans, of the vision that had been growing in my heart and my mind for so many years. I told them of my dream to create a foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping those in need, to providing education and opportunity to the most vulnerable and disadvantaged members of our society. I told them of my desire to use the wealth and the influence that I had accumulated over a lifetime of hard work and dedication to make a real and lasting difference in the world, to leave a legacy of compassion and generosity that would endure long after I was gone. And as I spoke, as I poured out my heart and my soul to the people I loved most in the world, I saw the tears in their eyes, the pride and the love and the respect that shone from their faces. They embraced me then, one by one, holding me close and whispering words of encouragement and support, of gratitude and admiration for the man I had been and the man I had become. And in that moment, surrounded by the warmth and the love of my family, I knew that I had truly succeeded, that I had achieved the greatest and most enduring victory of my life. For I had not only built a successful business and a thriving family, but I had also built a legacy of goodness and decency, a testament to the power of love and compassion to change lives and transform the world. And as I looked out at the faces of my loved ones, at the shining eyes and the smiling faces of the next generation, I knew that my work would live on, that the seeds I had planted would continue to grow and flourish long after I was gone. For I was Daniel Brooks, a husband, a father, a leader, and a servant, a man who had lived a life of purpose and meaning, a life that had touched and inspired countless others. And as long as my story was remembered, as long as my example was followed and my values were upheld, then I knew that my spirit would endure, that my legacy would live on in the hearts and minds of all those who came after me. And that, in the end, was the greatest gift of all, the most precious treasure that any man could ever hope to leave behind. So let us go forth with courage and conviction, with open hearts and open minds, ready to face the challenges and the opportunities of this life with the same strength and resilience that have always been our birthright. Let us remember the lessons of the past, the sacrifices and the triumphs of those who came before us, and let us use those lessons to build a broader and more beautiful future for ourselves and for generations yet to come. And let us never, ever forget the power of love and compassion, the unbreakable bonds of family and friendship, the enduring legacy of a life well lived and a heart well loved. For that is the true measure of success, the only wealth that really matters in the end. And it is a wealth that each and every one of us has the power to create, if only we have the courage and the wisdom to reach for it. So let us go forth with joy and with hope, with the strength and the determination of those who know that the best is yet to come, and that the road ahead is full of promise and possibility. For we are the inheritors of a great and noble tradition, the sons and daughters of Daniel Brooks and all those who came before him. And as long as we hold fast to the values and the ideals that have always been our guiding light, then I know that there is nothing we cannot achieve, no dream that we cannot make real. It has been 10 years since that fateful day when I first confronted Ethan and Valerie about their betrayal. 10 years since I began the long and difficult journey of rebuilding my family and my legacy. And as I sit here in the twilight of my years, surrounded by the love and the laughter of my dildren and grandchildren, I can't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude and wonder for the incredible life that I have been blessed to live. Oh, it hasn't always been easy. There have been plenty of challenges and setbacks along the way. Plenty of moments when the old doubts and fears threatened to creep back in. But through it all, I have held fast to the values and the principles that have always been my anchor and my guide. The unshakable faith in the power of love and forgiveness to heal. I'll even the deepest wounds and bridge even the widest divides. And now, as I look back on all that I have accomplished and all that I have overcome, I feel a sense of peace and contentment that I have never known before. A quiet satisfaction in knowing that I have lived a life of purpose and meaning. A life that has made a difference in the world. The Brooks Foundation that I created all those years ago has grown and flourished beyond my wildest dreams, touching the lives of countless people and communities around the globe. Through its programs and initiatives, it has provided education and opportunity to those who might otherwise have been left behind. It has brought hope and healing to the most vulnerable and disadvantaged members of our society. And through it all, it has carried on the legacy of compassion and generosity that has always been the hallmark of the Brooks family, the enduring testament to the power of love and service to change lives and transform the world. As for my own family, they have been my greatest joy and my deepest comfort, the shining light that has guided me through even the darkest of times. Ethan and Valerie have become the kind of leaders and the kind of people that I always knew they could be, full of integrity and compassion, of wisdom and strength. They have taken the reins of Brooks Banking Co. and guided it to new heights of success and prosperity, while never losing sight of the values and the ideals that have always been the foundation of our family and our business. And my grandchildren. Oh, my precious grandchildren. They have been the greatest blessing of my life, the living embodiment of all my hopes and dreams for the future. They are kind and caring, curious and courageous, full of the same spark and spirit that I see in myself and in all those who came before me. And I know that as long as they carry on the Brooks name and the Brooks legacy, as long as they hold fast to the values of love and compassion, of integrity and service, then the future will be in good hands, and the world will be a brighter and more beautiful place. And so, as the sun begins to set on another perfect day, as I feel the warmth of my wife's hand in mine, and hear the laughter of my children and grandchildren echoing through the halls of our home, I close my eyes and offer up a silent prayer of thanks for all that I have been given, for all that I have been able to give in return. For I am Daniel Brooks, a husband, a father, a leader, and a servant, a man who has lived a life of purpose and meaning, a life that has touched and inspired countless others. And as long as I draw breath, as long as my heart beats with the love and the compassion that have always been my greatest strength, I will continue to strive and to serve, to give back to the world that has given me so much. For that is my calling, my mission, my solemn duty, and my sacred trust. And it is a duty that I will fulfill with every fiber of my being, with every ounce of my strength and my devotion, until the very end of my days and beyond. If you found Daniel's story of integrity, love, and the enduring power of family and legacy inspiring, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting tales of everyday heroes making a difference in the world. And don't forget to share your own experiences and reflections in the comments below. We all have a story to tell, a lesson to learn, a life to live with purpose and meaning. By sharing our journeys and our wisdom, we inspire and uplift each other, and we create a world that is a little brighter, a little more beautiful, a little more full of hope and possibility. So let us go forth with courage and conviction, with the strength and the determination of those who know that the best is yet to come, and that the road ahead is full of promise and possibility. Let us remember the lessons of Daniel Brooks and all those who came before him, and let us use those lessons to build a broader and more beautiful future for ourselves and for generations yet to come. And let us never, ever forget the power of love and compassion, the unbreakable bonds of family and friendship, the enduring legacy of a life well lived and a heart well loved. For that is the true measure of success, the only wealth that really matters in the end. And it is a wealth that each and every one of us has the power to create, if only we have the courage and the wisdom to reach for it. So let us go forth with joy and with hope, with open hearts and open minds. For the world is waiting for us, and the future is ours to shape. And together, there is nothing we cannot achieve, no dream that we cannot make real. Thank you, and may the love and the light of Daniel Brooks guide us all, now and forever.